Hello, my name is Shawni Pothier, and I'm so excited to be here today on this Mom Summit. What a great way to be able to connect as mothers. I love motherhood so much that years ago I started writing a blog called 71 Toes, and it just started out being my family journal, but it turned out to be a great way to be able to express all kinds of ideas and thoughts, challenges, and failures and successes of motherhood. And through it, I've been able to connect with moms from all over the world. And I love that because there's so many different cultures and different age ranges and different struggles that we deal with as mothers. But it's so awesome that we can connect in the motherhood trenches and try to figure things out together. I want to introduce my family for a minute. Here's a picture. You'll see that we have 5 kids. The oldest is that boy back in the back. He's 21, and the youngest is the girl in front of him with the red glasses. She is 12. So we are morphing right into teenagerhood as fast as we can. Can't seem to slow time down. This is where I feel like I should still be. For some reason, it's just changed, but I should be, in my mind, still snuggled up with all these little kids around me, a baby on my hip, and a toddler pulling at my leg. Instead, I just find myself here. This is the latest family picture we have with a new addition. My son just found a pretty awesome girl and got married in December. So we are definitely in uncharted motherhood territory. And you know what? It is pretty awesome. Growing up, I had stars in my eyes about motherhood. But those stars were really geared toward babies. I wanted my own babies with all my heart. And when I finally got my own babies, I was so excited. And I loved them so much. Now, that's not to say that those baby years were perfect. Oftentimes, this is what we got. I'm sure some of you mothers out there can relate to that face on that little girl. And I was even enamored, well, probably not enamored, but I loved those babies, even when sometimes they resulted in this. That's a really, really gross picture, I know, but that baby had some serious reflux. And look at my face. Why am I smiling? I don't know, but I sure loved those babies. And guess what? Those babies of mine obviously have grown up to be teenagers. And I have realized how much I adore teenagers. They are pretty awesome. They are not boring though, and it takes some work to develop those relationships with them. So wherever we are in our motherhood, whether we have little kids or teenagers already, or even young adults, it's never too early or too late to work on those relationships. So today I want to talk a little bit about how to connect with them. And then at the very end, I want to follow up with how to disconnect, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but bear with me, we'll get there. First, I want to talk about 3 ways in which we can connect in order to create great relationships with our kids. The first is that we need to communicate with them. Now, that seems kind of obvious, I know, but we need to open the doors of communication. I remember really well sitting in an orthodontist office, probably before I had any teenagers, with my son who was getting braces. And I was sitting in the waiting room, sitting across the table from a mom and her teenage daughter. And I remember my jaw kind of dropping because that teenager was talking her mother's ear off. She was telling her everything from what the latest trends were to the drama that was happening with her friends to the things that she was worried about. And I remember just being in awe thinking, I want my kids to talk to me like that someday. I want to know what they're going through. I want to be able to relate to them in the way that that mom obviously is relating to her daughter. And of course, I know every kid is totally different. Some are more willing to share and some are more quiet. But there's certain things that I think we can do to help open that communication, like that girl in the orthodontist office all those years ago. One thing there's a couple just different little things that we've done in our family. One is lunch dates. I started when my kids were young to take them out to lunch every once in a while. I just figured that was the only time I was going to get a little bit more one-on-one time with them. And of course, when my babies were little, they were in tow with us. But those kids that I took out of school for lunch knew that I really cared about them. I really wanted to be with them, and it meant a lot to them, and I think it really helped open our communication. This lunch date tradition has extended into the teenage years, and I love it. It's a little bit trickier with kids when they're in high school and junior high to get them out of their classes, but you can make it work, and it makes such a difference, and it is such a great way for them to open up. Another thing that we've done in our family to open that communication is 5-facet reviews. And it sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. It's really very simple. It's just thinking about the 5 facets with our kids. So there's emotional, spiritual, social, mental, and physical. Got to remember those. Anyway, there's just 5 different facets to think about. And oftentimes, as my kids have grown, and even when they're older, we talk about all these different facets together. Sometimes I would even do that at lunch dates with my kids. And I love this book that my brother gave me a while ago. He called it my spiritual creation book, which was it's an awesome gift. But sometimes I would go through this book with my kids and take little notes and say, okay, how is Grace doing emotionally? How is she doing socially? Do we need to have some more play dates? Do I need to encourage her now in the teenage years? Do I need to take away social media a little bit, build a better relationship with that? What do we need to do to help with those 5 facets? And I think it really helps to write them down and have a tangible record, because either with our kids or on our own with a spouse or someone who loves those kids, maybe a grandparent, it's awesome to be able to go through all those different things and figure out where we are and where we need to go and how to open. It just helps to open that communication with kids. Another idea that we've loved in our family is just really listening. And I know that this takes a lot of work. One of my favorite books is How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. It's kind of a threadbare book because I've read it a lot, but I just think it's so important in today's day and age to show our kids, to model good friendships with our kids. I think that they lack that a little bit in this world when there's so much social media going around and there's not really much face-to-face communication. I think that we can be such great models to our kids of being there for them and really listening to what they have to say. I loved when I was younger that my dad would take me aside every once in a while and say, hey, Shawni, I want to tell you how I think you're feeling, and you tell me if I'm right. And it was pretty awesome. It made me feel so understood to have my dad just sit there and say, this is how you're feeling. And most often he was right. He was obviously paying attention. And sometimes when he wasn't, I was able to correct him. But it was really great to be able to open our communication. And I'm so thankful for that. The second thing I want to talk about as far as connection goes is help teenagers and kids in general feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. I think it's so interesting how teenagers, it's so easy for them to be very insular, be really worried about themselves. It's a big deal because it's a big job. But it's so important for them to feel like they're connected to something bigger, and it's not just all about them. So I want to talk about how we can help them connect to something bigger as in the family, as well as something bigger as in the world around them. And with the family, my husband and I came up with a family motto years ago. And it took us a little while, a few thoughts to think about, but we came up with 4 words. They were learn, work, serve, and respect. And I'm going to show you a picture that shows how we incorporated love through all that. So here is the motto with learn, work, serve, respect, and then love is worked right through the middle. I gotta admit, we were pretty proud of ourselves for figuring that out, but it became part of our family, and we actually got it framed and hung it in our family room, and it became part of our family identity. We would say it before every family meeting. We still do. Every week we try to have a little family meeting, and my youngest daughter makes sure that we stand up and say this motto together. And we've worked it into a lot of different things in our family. Okay, so the way we can help our kids become something bigger than themselves as far as the world goes is help them to reach out of themselves and serve and love others. I love the story my mom told us growing up over and over again. And now I tell my kids over and over again, from when she was a teenager, a very shy, very insecure teenager in high school who was miserable. And she tells about how she came home every day and complained to her mom about how miserable she was. And one day, that great mother of hers, who's my grandma, who's the best, said, Linda, you need to go to school tomorrow and you need to find someone who's more miserable than you are and you need to be friends with them. And my mom looked at her like she was crazy and said, there is no one that's more miserable than I am. I am so sad. And her mom said, you know what? You'd be surprised. So sure enough, my mom went to school the next day and she looked around. She was able to look outside of herself a little bit. And she did find someone who looked like they were more lonely and maybe a little bit more sad than she was. And she got up the courage to go and make friends with this girl, start talking to her. And through that interaction, she was able to make a new friend and she was able to help herself come out of her shell a little bit. And of course, I'm sure that she helped that girl quite a lot as well. And I think it's so important for kids to know that they can be a light. They can make a difference in people's lives. They don't have, it's not all about them. And I think that brings a lot of teenager happiness as well as good communication and interaction. The third part of connection I wanted to touch on is respect. And I'm not talking about having them respect us, although that is an important thing. I'm talking about us respecting them. It is hard to be a teenager. And it's hard sometimes to remember being a teenager because it feels like a really long time ago for me. I was talking with a group of friends a little while ago, and we were talking about how tough motherhood is in some way or another. And one friend mentioned how important it is not to project what we know and our experiences and how mature we are into what we feel like our kids should know and do. I think it's so easy to look at a 17-year-old and say, why don't you know this? This is, just expect them to be able to make decisions and make good judgments like we could now after having all of our life experiences. They haven't had that yet. And so to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit more often. I love the story of my friend who was driving two of her small boys to school one day, one older than the other, and she was quite angry at the older child because he had done something wrong. She was actually kind of irate, as she described it. And she just lectured that boy all the way to school, telling him what he did wrong, and she was mad at him. And he got out of school, head dropped, feeling a little bit dejected and sad to go into his day. And as he walked up the pathway to the school, the younger son rolled down his window and yelled out the window, "Hey, Jason, I love you." And that mom watched that son of hers stand up straighter, put a smile on that gloomy face, and walk into school with his chin up and able to face the day. And she was so thankful for her younger son for teaching her that day, because of course kids are going to get in trouble, and of course there's room for improvement and guidance, and we are going to lose our temper sometimes, but it's so important to just give them the benefit of the doubt every once in a while and try to build them up. One way that my dad, again, I've got lots of good stories about my dad. One way that he did that, showing respect for us growing up, is that he would take us in his lap every once in a while, and he would write on our fingertips, which sounds kind of funny, but it was awesome. He would write, "Okay, Shawni, you know what? I think you're actually really good at the dishes. I've been noticing that you've been helping with the dishes a lot lately." So he would write a little D on my thumb. And the next finger he'd take and say, "You know what? I think that I've noticed that you're a really good peacemaker in our house. And so I'm going to write a little P for peacemaker." And he would go through my fingers and I would just glow because I would have all these things that he respected, that he thought were cool about me. And I started that when my kids were little with them. And it is amazing what an effect it has. And it's pretty funny because I've actually done it a few times with my teenagers too, because they need that affirmation more than anyone. And of course, they wipe off those little letters a little quicker than the little kids did, but it's pretty fun to watch them glow as they got those little letters written on their fingers. I just also think it's just really important to give hugs. And I think we forget a little bit about that physical touch and how important it is when our kids are growing older, and they're sometimes taller than us and more surly and angular. And I think it's so important to remember that they need some physical touch. And I think that there's a study that I've heard of that says that even the 8-second hug, which is actually a long time, is hugely important for kids. So take a little time to give those tall, angular, sometimes surly teenagers a little extra love. Give them hugs whenever you can, and it makes such a difference, especially in this world where there's so much disconnection going on. Okay, so there are some tips and ideas on connecting, and I know that there's so many great ideas out there, and I wish that we could have a discussion and share them all, but just some little things to get your brain going. And on to disconnecting, just a couple of things that I've been thinking about how important it is to disconnect when it comes to teenagers. The first is disconnecting with our phones. I know that there's so much talk going around about how important it is for kids to stay away from phones and how dangerous they are, and I totally agree with that. We need to find some balance with that. But I think that it's so important for mothers to disconnect from their phones. I am aware that there's so many things on our phones with technology. It's so great to be able to keep track of things, everything from carpools to grocery lists to all of our calendaring events. But I think there's a time in the day then that we should be putting those phones away and really letting our eyes shine when our kids come in a room and not be so distracted by the things that are taking up so much time and attention these days. And the second thing I think that we need to disconnect from is fighting our kids' battles. And maybe this is just something that I'm dealing with right now, but I think it's so easy to go, when our kids are little, we fight those battles for them. We have to. They don't know any better. They don't know how to do it. But when they grow, it's so important to distance ourselves a little bit from that tethering to them to try to fight those battles. I think it's so easy for me, for example, when my teenagers come home and they've procrastinated on an assignment and their grade is really important and they want to have help on a paper and stay up all night. It's so easy for me to just jump in and do that with them. But I think it's so important in things like that for us to disconnect ourselves and say, you know what, I'm sorry that you made that decision. You're going to have to brave it alone and figure this out. I think it's so important to let kids fail sometimes. And in this day and age, I don't know what it is, but it's hard. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like we need to let those kids fail. We don't need to be afraid of letting them fall on their faces one time or another, because that's how they're going to learn in the long run. And that is how they're going to grow into being strong and capable adults. I just want to close by saying I am so not perfect at all this stuff. I just freaked out at my daughter yesterday. I wasn't disconnecting in the right way. And I am apt to grab my phone quite a lot, and I sometimes forget to disconnect. But isn't that what motherhood is all about? We're just trying to figure this out the best we can. And I want to show you a painting that I love that depicts so beautifully the beauty of motherhood. See this mother guiding her little baby along? See those muscles that are so intense and working so hard, and see her gaze on that baby? Of course, we can't be like this all the time, but it does show the intensity that mother is, and it's okay if we fail over and over and over again. We can just start over. I love the quote, "Oh God of second chances, here I am again." Because that's true. Every new day is a new chance for us. I just want to leave today with a special challenge for each mom out there, and for myself included, to write down 3 things that you can do in your own unique way as a mother to connect and nurture those relationships that are so important and make a difference and shine your motherhood light in a way that only you can do it. And I want to thank you so much for coming to the Mom Summit, and I'm so excited to learn from all the other moms as well. And may we all have the best of luck as we muddle through this wonderful, joyful, frustrating, and great thing called motherhood.